The 7 Chaos Emeralds hold a myriad of mysteries, and while we've learned a lot about them along the way up until this point, there are still so many unanswered secrets. Being capable of granting miracles, their full potential is seemingly boundless. They really do seem to be able to do almost anything if your heart is truly set on it. Harnessing the power of the Chaos Emeralds, whether that be for good or for evil, is often used as a plot device within the Sonic series. Dr. Eggman often utilizes them to fuel his destructive weapons, while Sonic channels their power to transform into Super Sonic, thwarting Eggman's malicious plans. For a long time, this was the norm, until the introduction of a certain ability that changed everything. Welcome to Chaomix, and this is the lore of Chaos Control. At a first glance, the name Chaos Control seems like a paradox. After all, how does one control the uncontrollable? Well, the answer lies within Sonic Adventure 2, where this special ability made its grand debut, expanding on the utility of the Chaos Emeralds beyond just their raw power. Because before this, the Chaos Emeralds were only ever really used for that exact purpose, whether for one of Eggman's nefarious schemes or Sonic's super form. Sonic Adventure 2, however, introduced a new side to the Emeralds: the power to manipulate space and time. This feat was first showcased by Shadow the Hedgehog, the ultimate lifeform created by Eggman's grandfather, Gerald Robotnik. During his initial confrontation with Sonic, Shadow would demonstrate his proficiency in Chaos Control, where he'd warp through space to effortlessly outpace Sonic. Sonic himself even acknowledges this, noting that it wasn't Shadow's natural speed that gave him the edge, but rather the Chaos Emerald's power that allowed him to warp, leaving Sonic to completely eat dust. Shadow also demonstrates Chaos Control when rescuing Rouge from the exploding prison island, warping her out at the last second. This shows that Chaos Control can be used to warp multiple people simultaneously, not just the user. But don't think for a second that Shadow is the only one capable of wielding Chaos Control. Near the end of Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic finds himself ejected into outer space inside of an escape pod. He manages to use Chaos Control to warp himself out just before the pod explodes, using a fake Chaos Emerald no less. This was only possible because of Tails designing the counterfeit emerald to possess the same wavelength and properties as a genuine one. So not only does Sonic figure out how to use Chaos Control for the first time all within seconds before exploding, but also with a fake emerald. Sonic later harnesses Chaos Control during his final showdown with Shadow on the Space Colony arc.
I'll use your Chaos Control!
And once more, side by side with Shadow. This time utilizing the power of all 7 emeralds to warp the entirety of the Space Colony arc off of its collision course with Earth. So obviously the strength of Chaos Control depends on how many emeralds you have in your possession. The more you have, the larger the object you can warp. Like how Super Sonic and Shadow were able to use their combined powers along with the 7 Chaos Emeralds to warp the entire space station, which actually was only on a collision course with Earth because the Bio Lizard, the prototype ultimate lifeform, used Chaos Control to fuse himself into the arc to put it on its collision course. Yes, even the Bio Lizard can use Chaos Control, not only to teleport himself, but also merge himself with another object. Another way of using Chaos Control to manipulate space. But remember when I said that Chaos Control can be used to manipulate both space and time? Well, until now, we've been talking about the space aspect and how it can be used for teleportation and other feats like how it allowed the Bio Lizard to merge with the Space Colony arc. But this special technique has another facet to it: the ability to manipulate time. Yes, this is another technique of Chaos Control, and one that was first revealed not within the story of Sonic Adventure 2, but in the multiplayer mode. In the multiplayer mode of Sonic Adventure 2, both Sonic and Shadow are able to use Chaos Control to halt time for their opponent after collecting 60 rings. However, they aren't the only ones with this ability, or at least something resembling it. You see, other characters can perform a move that looks similar on the surface, but if you pay close attention, isn't actually the same thing. Allow me to elaborate. Amy, for instance, is able to perform a move to stop her opponent, but you may notice that the opponent isn't truly frozen in time. If you look closely, you can see that their inertia continues to carry through, even after the move is performed on them. It's basically as if you had unplugged your opponent's controller, meaning this move doesn't actually stop time, it just constricts the opponent's controls. Tikal and Chaos also have the same exact type of special move where they constrict their opponent's controls. So let's take another look at Sonic and Shadow's time stop ability. You can clearly see that Shadow is utterly suspended in the air when Sonic's time stop is used against him. And we can also see that the environment comes to a complete stop, as shown by this car that's about to pass by, totally freezing in its tracks. Conversely, if we look back at the environment when someone like Amy uses her special ability, we can clearly see time progressing as usual. Since Shadow and Sonic are the only confirmed playable Chaos Control users within the game's story, it makes sense why they'd also be the only ones truly capable of stopping time in the game's multiplayer mode. Meanwhile, Amy, Tikal, and Chaos have a pseudo version of Chaos Control that never truly matches the extent of the real deal. These characters being able to legitimately use Chaos Control is actually a huge misconception. So hopefully this clears things up and shows that these abilities are not the same thing. Anyways, whether these abilities are canon or not is a bit iffy as it is, since it's in the multiplayer mode of Sonic Adventure 2 rather than the story. But hey, it's in the game, so I figured I'd talk about it anyways. But don't fret, because as we continue, the abilities of Chaos Control continue to expand, and we do get some additional characters joining in to put them to good use. Sonic Heroes introduces us to a menacing new form for Metal Sonic called Neo Metal Sonic. In the final boss battle of the game, pits Super Sonic and friends against Neo Metal Sonic's final form, Metal Overlord. Because Neo Metal Sonic had the capabilities to copy specific abilities from each of our heroes, Shadow's Chaos Control would be duplicated earlier on in the game's story. This would allow Metal Overlord to use Chaos Control during his encounter with Super Sonic and friends, completely stopping them in time and allowing him to freely barrage them with attacks. Black Doom, in 2005's hit game Shadow the Hedgehog, is also known to be able to use Chaos Control. In the game's story, it's revealed that Shadow was created using Black Doom's own DNA, which is the entire reason he's so proficient in the special technique in the first place. So while Shadow was the first character shown on screen to be able to use it, it was actually Black Doom who was the first to master its abilities thousands of years ago. Throughout the game, we see Black Doom use Chaos Control to teleport himself as well as Shadow to many locations. And at the end of the game, Black Doom uses Chaos Control to warp the entire Black Comet onto Earth's surface, allowing it to release a paralyzing gas into the atmosphere. With the inhabitants of Earth completely paralyzed, the Black Arms would be able to freely feast. Well, until Shadow turns out to be naturally immune to the gas, just like the Black Arms, since he shares the same DNA. Anyways, Silver the Hedgehog is another proficient user of Chaos Control, as demonstrated in Sonic 06. And it's here where we see yet another one of the technique's abilities. We already know that a user of Chaos Control is able to halt time around their opponents, but we learn in Sonic 06 that we can take this a step further. Throughout the game, Silver uses Chaos Control along with Sonic and Shadow to bounce between present, future, and even the past. So not only can Chaos Control halt time, but it can actually move a user through time, forwards and backwards. The final character I'd like to talk about is Knuckles, because if you want to get technical, Knuckles' control over the Master Emerald, and in turn all of the Chaos Emeralds, seems to be in some shape or form Chaos Control. Like how we see him attempting to neutralize the Chaos Emeralds during the final encounter with the Bio-Lizard at the end of Sonic Adventure 2, or how he's able to sense the Master Emerald's location even when split into tiny pieces like in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. Sure, it's never referred to as Chaos Control, but he's literally controlling the Chaos Emerald, so I think this power is at least very closely related. There are quite a handful of characters able to use Chaos Control, but even so, Shadow is without a doubt the most proficient at it. We've honestly only scratched the surface of what this technique is fully capable of, because Shadow alone has an entire arsenal of additional moves that derive from Chaos Control. So let's go over some of these unique abilities. Probably the most common offense-based move that Shadow uses is Chaos Spear, a lightning bolt projectile that can both damage and even stun opponents. This ability first debuted in Sonic Adventure 2, but is found throughout many later games like Sonic 06. Another unique move to Sonic 06 is Chaos Boost, which allows Shadow to be temporarily engulfed in red chaos energy, enhancing his overall performance and providing immunity to lesser attacks. Introduced into real gameplay in Sonic 06, but actually first shown off in the CGI opening for Shadow the Hedgehog a year earlier, Chaos Snap is an ability that allows Shadow to warp from enemy to enemy, chaining attacks. It's very similar to the homing attack, but without all the needless travel. And I gotta be honest, this is probably one of the most badass attacks in all of Sonic. Shadow the Hedgehog, the game, not the character, well, I guess the character as well, also establishes another powerful ability derived from Chaos Control. One of the special moves Shadow is able to perform in this game after fulfilling the commands of Dark Aligned allies is Chaos Blast. a powerful shockwave of red chaos energy that decimates anything it touches. Conversely, fulfilling the commands of the hero allies allows Shadow to use chaos control, this time shooting Shadow forward through the level at breakneck speeds, allowing him to skip certain sections entirely. Sonic Battle is probably where most of Shadow's additional chaos abilities lie. There's a ton of them, so I'm not going to go over every single one since a lot of them are just basic attacks enhanced with the power of chaos control. But some of the cooler ones that stick out have to be Chaos Magic, allowing Shadow to summon a sphere of violent wind at a snap of a finger, or Roaming Chaos, which brings forth a ball of electricity that slowly follows Shadow, acting as an obstruction for the opponent to avoid. Now, what if I told you that you can use Chaos Control without a Chaos Emerald? Because there are a few instances of characters using Chaos Control without even being in possession of an Emerald. While this is intentional or a continuity error is kind of up for debate, but let me attempt to explain why I think this is a canonical truth. Towards the end of Sonic Battle, Shadow gives Emerald a Chaos Emerald in his possession. This emerald would complete Emerald's collection, leading him to having all 7, meaning Shadow is 100% confirmed to not have any Chaos Emeralds after this transaction, but continues to use all of his moves that involve Chaos Control in the following battle against Emerald. Some might excuse this as a case of gameplay not accurately reflecting the narrative, but to that I actually disagree. It's actually directly noted in-game by Emerald that by giving up the Emerald, Shadow would be putting himself at a disadvantage. Because as we would assume, without the Emerald, Shadow wouldn't be able to use Chaos Control. But to this, Shadow says that he doesn't need the Emerald anymore because he has Maria in his heart. This implies that instead of drawing energy from the Chaos Emeralds, he draws it from his heart, his own strength. Keep this in mind for later. Anyways, there's another case of Chaos Control being used without a Chaos Emerald in Shadow 05. During the last story, Black Doom takes all 7 Chaos Emeralds from Shadow and flees after warping the Black Comet down to Earth. Despite not having any emeralds in his possession, Shadow chases after Black Doom and comes across several areas where using Chaos Control is the only way through. The level forces Shadow to use it to progress. And no, this isn't another gameplay over narrative situation, because several times throughout the level, the character specifically instructs Shadow to use Chaos Control to make his way inside. Even when Shadow confronts Black Doom, we can see all 7 Chaos Emeralds hovering over his head, confirming that Shadow did all of this without any emeralds. So how is this even possible? Well, Chaos Control requires lots of energy to be performed, and with the Chaos Emeralds possessing immense amounts, drawing from their power would allow the user to perform the technique repeatedly with ease. And yeah, when using a Chaos Emerald, harnessing the power of Chaos Control is second nature to a lot of these characters exactly because of that. But what happens when someone tries using Chaos Control without an emerald? Well, it needs the energy from somewhere, so instead of drawing power from the emeralds, it seems that this power is taken from the user's own energy reserves. Like Shadow said in Sonic Battle, he doesn't need the emerald if he draws energy from his own heart. Funny enough, I think this is where rings come into play. For instance, in Sonic Adventure 2's multiplayer mode, Sonic and Shadow are able to use Chaos Control like I mentioned before, but this is only after 60 rings are collected. Rings are often seen as an energy source in the Sonic universe, so it makes sense that Chaos Control can only be used after collecting a certain amount. I think we can assume that the characters in the multiplayer mode aren't in possession of a Chaos Emerald too, because if they were, why would they need 60 rings in order to perform it? The Chaos Emerald should just allow them to use it at will. This further proves my theory that Chaos Control can be used without a Chaos Emerald. But even so, using an Emerald will always be the better option. After all, the power of the Chaos Emerald is nearly unlimited, so the extent of the technique is greatly amplified when using one. So while it's technically possible to use Chaos Control without the Emeralds, don't expect anyone to be warping entire space vessels or doing interdimensional travel. Chaos Control is an awesome power that has captivated fans ever since its introduction, myself included. It once used to play a pivotal role in the Sonic series, providing new and exciting possibilities for our beloved characters. But over the years, and especially recently, I gotta say we don't really see it anymore. Sure, Shadow will bust it out every once in a while for a basic move, but for other characters like Sonic and Silver, I don't think I've seen them use it since around Sonic 06. Listen, if they're not gonna let other characters use Chaos Control anymore, I guess I only have one request. You gotta at least replace it with something equally, if not more cool. Like, come on. I mean, let's face it, Chaos Control is cool as fuck. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today's video. If you liked it, leave a like, and make sure to subscribe for even more cool Sonic videos like this one. In the comments below, I only have one question for you guys. Do you think that characters can use Chaos Control without a Chaos Emerald? Thank you so much to my amazing channel members, and with all of that being said, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. Peace.